All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Steve Jagger. I graduated from Vancouver College in 1996, and I'm the current co-president of the Alumni Association along with Mark Reed. The Vancouver College Alumni Association is a member-driven organization aimed to bring all alumni together. We run annual alumni events like the golf tournament. We do the Irish Christmas lunch, a hockey game, there's a fishing derby, basketball tournament, there's lots. Essentially, all has been canceled for 2020. And so instead of just not having anything or doing anything, we decided we would pivot and start a bit of a webinar series as a way to connect alumni from around the world and learn about interesting things, interesting topics. So this is our fourth webinar that we're doing tonight. Before I introduce Dax, just a couple notes. You guys are all muted. You can throw your questions that you've got anytime into the chat. They'll pop up in front of me and I can ask Dax for you. So let me introduce Dax. So we've got here Dax Dasilva, graduated from Vancouver College in 1994. He's the founder and CEO of Lightspeed, which was founded in 2005. Lightspeed develops a cloud commerce platform used by retail and restaurant customers in over 100 countries. The company's mission is to bring cities and communities to life by powering independent businesses. Lightspeed employs over 1,200 staff in 14 cities and raised $292 million US before it went IPO in March of 2019. Dax is also the founder of Never Apart, a cultural nonprofit determined to bring about positive social change and unity through original programming with global reach and impact. And finally, if that wasn't enough, he's also an author. He wrote the book, The Age of Union, Igniting the Change Maker, which brings leadership, spirituality, and environmental guardianship together. So thank you very much, Dax. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me, and hello to everybody.
So maybe let's, we could jump in a couple, with lots to talk about. Maybe we can start with the Vancouver College side of things. Can you maybe give a little backgroround? What year did you show up at Vancouver College? Are you 12-year man, or you show up in grade 8? When did you start there?
I started in grade 8, so it would have been like 1989, I think. Graduated 94, class 94.
Nice. Do you know why your parents enrolled you at VC?
So I went to St. Paul's elementary school in Richmond. Richmond, yeah. And I guess, you know, every ambition for every guy was to go to VC, and for every girl was to go to LFA. So yeah, all my close friends all went to VC. Nice.
And then you played some sports at Vancouver College? Or you were involved in the basketball team? I know that.
I did not. I mean, I was more on the academic side. In retrospect, I wish I'd tried out to do more sports. I was basketball manager, but didn't really think of myself as athletic, and probably should have attempted more things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you go after Vancouver College?
UBC.
Nice. And then I remember you took something there and then you switched, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was doing software and computers since from an early age. I was I was apprenticing with an Apple developer at 13, did software projects and tech support, you know, all through my teens and 20s. So I thought logically I'd go into computer science. I did a year of that, and I realized I was not going to be an engineer because I always approached software through a design lens. And so I took a year off, worked, and then went back and did religious studies and art history, which actually informs some of the other projects that have been important to me, like Never Apart and Age of Union. So yeah.
So you can't code?
Computers anyway. Sorry, no, I can code. So I did code the original Lightspeed, and I coded for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't going to become an engineer. I was much more of a software designer and not such a pro coder like the kind we employ today.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So UBC, how did Lightspeed's based in Montreal? What can you connect the dots on? How did you get to Montreal? Like, why Montreal? And yeah, was it Lightspeed that took you there, or you were there first and then Lightspeed happened?
No, so life took me there first. So I moved with a wave of friends. Moved kind of in our early 20s, 24, 25. You know, those that wanted to have fun went to Montreal for the culture and you know, the joie de vivre, and those that wanted to climb the corporate ladder went to Toronto. And all of us that went to Montreal actually all ended up starting businesses, as well as enjoyed, you know, the amazing culture of Montreal. So it was a cultural draw for sure.
Nice. And so how long were you there? What years were you there before getting Lightspeed started?
Oh, so I moved there in 2001 and worked on a couple of software jobs, and then started Lightspeed after one of those companies shut down. Started Lightspeed in 2005. So it was there a good 4 years before starting the company.
Did you, so you saw the need for Lightspeed because of one of these jobs? Is that how it came about? Or like, what's the founding story behind it all?
Yeah. So, having grown up in kind of the Apple culture, and this is before Apple had its comeback, was a big kind of Mac nut all through my teens and 20s, and worked in the dealerships and worked with the dealerships. And over the course of working for all these dealerships in Vancouver and in Montreal, wrote software for them for their operations. And if you look at what an Apple dealership does, and you look at what a current Lightspeed customer does, it's some very similar kinds of things. They're complex retailers. It's retailers that manage big inventory. Maybe hundreds of thousands of SKUs, including a lot of parts. They do service repair. They do corporate sales, do floor sales, suppliers with complex purchasing with multiple currency suppliers all over the place. And so having had experience building software for these custom pieces of software for these different Apple dealerships over time, realized that when I left my last custom project and another custom project was proposed to me, I thought, no more custom projects. I'm going to build a platform that's not going to be just applicable to a computer store, but also made sure that our early betas also could run a furniture store, a spa, all sorts of different kinds of early customers. So some of them were in Vancouver, in terms of use people, friends in my circle that were opening businesses as guinea pigs. So so that was the idea. The Mac was really coming back strong. Steve Jobs was back at Apple, and things were on the upswing, but there was just no business software. And people did want to start using Apple products in a business environment because they felt more in control of what they were doing. And if you think of point of sale systems, which is what we do, kind of the mini ERP, the mini operating system for business. The more you can feel in control of your data, and the more you can feel in control of your store, I think that's the aspiration of any independent business owner. So that was sort of the idea behind why Lightspeed was written. There was just basically no business software on the Mac that you could run your store.
There's nothing available. Wow. And so, and you started chasing these small businesses, and I guess they were coming off of nothing. They were just manually handling everything, or using Excel, or just figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, our early customers, for the first 2 years, our first 150, 200 customers were primarily Apple dealers, and then when we got to Lightspeed 2.0, and by the way, I'm writing most of this software myself. I had one other developer, but for the first couple of years, it was really sort of under the radar. We didn't really publicly launch the company. But when we got to Lightspeed 2.0, then all those dealers started to sell the software all around the world, because these dealerships were not just in US and Canada. They were in Saudi Arabia, they were in Ireland, they were in all over Australia. So they became our distribution. So for the first 7 years of the company, where we didn't take any investment, we bootstrapped the company. It was just all these dealerships that Apple was opening its fancy new stores across the street from these guys, and they needed to move into value-added services. And so Lightspeed became a reason for them to propose a system to a local business, and also sell networking and consulting and all the services that went along with it, training. And so we had these gatherings twice a year where we brought all these folks to Montreal, and then also a US location, and just trained them up, got them excited, a part of our family. And that was how we bootstrapped for the first 7 years.
Nice. And so bootstrapping for 7 years, then you go and raise, I believe the first round was like 20 or $30 million. Is that?
Yeah, our first one was $30 million from Excel Partners in the Valley. And, this is the investor behind Facebook, Dropbox, Slack. So really, really top of the top investor. And we didn't go looking for it.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah. I like the independence of building the company, on our own sales. But at some point, you saw other projects popping up in the Valley that looked similar to Lightspeed, that had tons of money behind it. One of the names was Square, even though they never really worked with our segment, and still don't, in terms of the more complex. But we start to think, okay, well, we're going to have to think about investment. But fortunately, we were really good at trade shows. We did Mackerel trade show for years and years, and loved building the biggest booth. It was trade shows were something that we really enjoyed. There's a certain showmanship about it. But at some point, we moved over to the National Retail Federation trade show in New York, and that's where investors started to notice Lightspeed, and we got a lot of incoming from that trade show. And one of them was Excel, and I was like, wow, of course, going to answer this call and see where it goes. And within a couple of weeks, we had a term sheet.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And were you at that time, were you thinking about raising money? And you're obviously you're successful enough, you must be getting inbound inquiries anyways. Were you just deleting them, or Excel just got your attention because of the name?
Kind of ignoring them. And I think Excel broke through it. And I think the real reason is I just don't have a finance background. So, I managed the cash of the business. It was super, I didn't understand that world. And I think the tech startup, world at that time, there wasn't a built out ecosystem, tech ecosystem in 2011 when this happened. Some of the local VC firms like Inovia, and Real, we're just getting started with their funds. And so this wasn't a world that we were, not like today where startups are, before you even build anything, you have a pitch deck and you have a list of investors you want to talk to, right? So the world is different. And so, I wasn't thinking that way. But then, when Excel came calling, we definitely, they really helped us mature the company. They were amazed that we got into $10 million in revenue without, sort of in our own little bubble. And so for them, it was sort of like this gem they uncovered that they liked the trends of Apple and the enterprise and mobile payments, because we'd moved beyond the Mac and we had an iPad version and we had a mobile version. And so they were like, okay, this is the intersection of two investment theses. And so they put, they were going to put 25 million. And then when they came to one of those training camps that I was telling you about with our resellers, when they saw they came to the one in Dallas, when they saw the 400 people that came out to get trained on Lightspeed, they were like, let's make it 30. So, so that was and it was a great relationship. Us and Excel, they went into the subsequent rounds, but over time we had more and more Canadian investors, which I think is also a good idea, because later at the 5-year mark, when Excel wanted to, they wanted an ROI and they wanted to sell the company before we were really ready to. The Canadian investors owned enough that we could sort of, pursue other avenues. Yeah.
Cool. And so on that topic, when they came at you with this $30 million, did you have partners in the business, or was you own the whole thing? If you hadn't taken any investment, and you'd split it up with some of the early people, or how did that work?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Like the early, before you took the money from Excel, did you own the whole company, or did some of your colleagues own a piece?
Yeah. Well, I think I did. So we started 2005. I did a stock options plan, an ESOP in 2008.
Yeah.
I think for any advice for people starting businesses, sometimes you don't know at the beginning, who's really going to, especially in the early days, you don't know who's really going to end up being with the company for long term. So, I didn't really institute one. Now it's different. People sort of, if they're going to put a lot of energy into a startup, they're going to want some kind of stake. So, we established an ESOP in 2008, and all of those people, I think, did, really, really well at the IPO for sure. But they waited a long time, because they weren't getting money off the table as we got our rounds of investment. So if you got your options in 2008, it wouldn't be until 2019 that you would see any gain from that.
Right.
Yeah, we did set it up then. And, at some point we had a philosophy where everybody that entered the company would get stock options. And that happens till today, even at 1,200 people.
Awesome. There's questions coming into the chat. And so I'll ask them as they sort of file into the sort of the order I've got here. But question just came in that says, what did Excel bring to the table besides cash? Did they promise sort of bench strength, help you hiring?
It's an excellent question, because for the first year, we didn't spend $1 of that $30 million.
You were profitable already?
We were profitable already. And, they actually deserve a lot of credit for spending the time with us. So, every Friday we'd have a call with them, and we just spent time professionalizing the company. So we brought in JP Chauvet, who's now, sort of my partner in crime, my president. So, a new go-to-market leader. We were already really good at sales. Obviously, we bootstrapped, and like sales was something we're very proud of. But he brought in a high-velocity sales model, which we've iterated, and I think it's one of the most innovative, parts of the company. And then we realized, I think, like you don't want to put gas on the fire until you're ready for the kind of until your product suite, your whole thing is ready for a lot of growth, right? And I think that what we determined after a year is that things were, even though they invested in the software that I had built on the Mac, and it had an iPad version and it had a mobile version, ultimately that, we realized that this was going to go to the cloud, that retail was going to go into the cloud way sooner than we thought, and that the real things that retailers were going to want to do, which was omni-channel, which is combining physical and digital, so e-commerce and in-store, and be able to do things like connect external platforms like accounting systems and loyalty programs and app ecosystems, and do all this stuff that the software is going to need to go into the cloud. And we looked at our software and like, okay, do we have the knowledge of how to adapt this to the cloud? And realized that it was just never going to happen. And so even though they invested on the basis of this software, they actually really invested in the team and believed that we could make a market leader out of this. And so, the investment finished in 2012, but by 2013, we'd done our first acquisition. So that was the first use of proceeds of the fund, was to buy a very, very nascent retail cloud provider that had sort of a similar feature set to what we had at Lightspeed. And it was called Merchant OS. And we took our best developers, our best iOS developers, and it was a very ugly software. Nobody else was even looking at it except for us, because we saw the potential. And we took that and we turned it into our flagship product, and we built an iOS app around it. And so that's when we realized sort of acquisitions was something we were good at, that we could take something like Google does. They buy a company, so a little seed of something, and then they bring resources and knowledge and marketing. And that's when we started to, really apply the funds that Excel had given to us.
Cool. That feeds right into my next question here around acquisitions. Like, how do you, so you're on the acquiring side. There's lots of smaller tech company owners out there and founders that are always trying to figure out, build a business and sell it to somebody of your size. How do you guys think about these businesses that you're acquiring? Are they something you're watching for a few years? Are they something you partner with first? Like how does or do you come in and just snap them up because you saw something interesting? Like, how does that process go?
So, we've done 9 acquisitions in our in our history. 5 of them were, as a private company, and 4 have just been in the last year since we went public. And the 4 that we did this in this past year, we've been talking to from long before the IPO. So we have a pipeline of companies that we're talking to, and for us, it's 3 categories. It's new geographies, or it's a new vertical, or it's added capabilities. And so, we nurture these conversations, we get to know the companies, and at some point we'll write a term sheet if we think it's like the right timing. We know enough about the company. There's agreement between management and our board that it's the right thing to do right now. And we have integration teams. So, do they have bandwidth and so on? And then they're always part of a bigger, longer term strategy of how do these puzzle pieces kind of fit together, and create a whole, create a long-term vision. So that's sort of how we go about it. And I think that they've been, organic growth is super important, but having inorganic growth, using acquisitions to leapfrog in a particular, whether it's a particular geography. There's companies, for example, we bought companies in Germany, Gastrofix, Counta in Australia. These are players that had been established as we went from retail to hospitality. So they've been hospitality in those countries for, 5 to 8 years. So in order to win that market, we'd have to displace them first. So probably better to, take that team, which has all that local knowledge and great engineers and so on, and bring them under our umbrella. And as long as we can, buy them for a multiple of revenue that's lower than what we're valued at on the stock market, you come out ahead and you end up building value.
Right. And are they usually stock deals, or you buy with cash in stock, or you open to anything depending just how the deal plays out?
So we're not open to anything. So I think one of the requirements is that, we like a 50-50 deal of cash and stock, so that people are buying into the idea of building together. If a company wants all cash, that's not necessarily, those aren't founders or a team that sees the greater picture of building stuff together.
Right.
But we will pay all cash to get some of the investors maybe some of their early investors. We don't necessarily need them incentivized. So we'll make sure that we can clear them out and make sure they're not on our cap table, and then maybe further incentivize the management team. And sometimes we find situations where the management team doesn't, and the original founders don't have much equity in the company anymore.
Yeah.
After a couple of rounds of financing or for whatever reason. So that's also an incentive for them to join, is that they'll join and they'll get more equity beyond just the purchase price in the combined company.
Right. Cool. So you guys you raised that money from Excel. I think you did, I'm just looking at your site, another 35 million, then another 61 million, then another 166 million. How do those rounds, how do you think about those rounds? Are those dollar amounts specific? Why is it 166, not 165? Do you decide based on your growth, you need a certain dollar amount, or how does that play out?
So I think that, after that first acquisition in 2013, we did another one in 2014, which was, we were like, okay, we're helping all the complex retailers, but we're getting all these leads for hospitality, for restaurant, and for, so we thought, okay, let's do another acquisition so that we can help all the businesses on the street. So what our CFO at the time was really good at doing is, we had a lot of incoming. Once Excel invested, we had a lot of people that wanted in. And so we would just say, one thing that we would sort of keep in touch with them and communicate to these investors that were excited was, okay, well, there's no opportunity right now, but when we have a transaction that comes up, we're going to buy a company, we'll let you know, and then you can jump in on that. Right. And so, the second round where we brought in Inovia and also some Quebec investors, was predicated on this deal that we were going to do to buy this hospitality company. And then the deal in 2015 was an e-commerce company in Amsterdam. And so there was another lineup of investors that wanted to be in on our next transaction. So part of those numbers are to buy that company.
Yeah.
And part of it was to, fund more growth and fund more operations. And some of those numbers are part a debt and credit facility, so that not all of it represents primary capital. And then at some points, we were able to, some of us that have been in the business for a while, were able to take some secondary off the table as well. So it's a composite of a couple things.
Great, which is always helpful, taking some off the table. When you think about after these rounds, you guys go public, can you tell us about the process of going public? Was it something these investors wanted? Was it something you wanted? Were you how did the process and the decision making go to make that happen?
Interesting. No investors wanted this.
No, they didn't.
So Excel, they wanted a ROI in 2017. So, 2 years before we went public. So part of that 160 round was, buying them out. And so they didn't really actually believe that we were going to be able to, they didn't see it happening. So right. They were wrong, but they didn't see it happening. So in 2017, and to be honest, I didn't really, that wasn't a life goal either. But when we got to 2019 and we had this new board, our chairman is Patrick Pichette, the former CFO of Google, a Canadian. Once we got this new board that was not all investors, that was more independent, all independent people that we brought in because of expertise, we started to have different conversations than we had when it was all, venture capital investors on our board. And a lot of credit to those venture capital investors. They helped us build this company. They helped us move into the cloud. They helped us through all of these, moments of adding value and building something good. But they didn't really help us. They weren't really looking at a long-term view. They weren't talking about, what's the, 5-year plan or 10-year plan for Lightspeed in the way that these new directors were. And so, I think that the decision to go public was a lot to do with the fact that we were really good at acquisitions, that we knew that if we were gonna win this market, which was a super fragmented market. You could find a leader in hospitality and retail in the cloud, a different one for almost every country, or every big region, that we were going to need to do a consolidation. In addition to growing organically, we're going to have this big acquisition roadmap, and that being a public company was the best way to have that public currency. Because when we were buying the smaller companies and as a private company, it was a big guess. It was a big leap of faith for them that they would ever be able to, that their stock would ever be worth anything. They got the cash, but at least with this, when you're public, you have a public currency that everybody knows the value of and can see it going to the next level. So it really made a lot of the conversations more real with the people that we were talking acquisition to. So it was a lot about being able to execute on acquisitions. But then there was this other big question around, TSX or dual listing on NASDAQ or NYSE. And that was, I think, like a bit of a tough one, because up until that point, every company that was a Canadian, a significant Canadian tech story, like for example, Shopify, did a dual listing, and people wanted the validation of the US market. Otherwise you wouldn't get your correct value. And so we took a bit of a risk. Internally, we called it Project Patriot. We thought, we're going to do a TSX only listing, and we think we are going to get the value. There is a scarcity of Canadian tech stories, and a lot of the other things that did well as a dual listing, a lot of Canadian investors didn't really benefit that much from it. So, if we give them the chance, we're going to get the support. And in the end, we got, I think we had for a $200 million IPO, we had about almost $3.5 billion in orders. So on both sides of the border. So a lot of folks have told me that, a lot of startup founders have told me that it really opened their eyes that we can actually, list on the TSX. And then, 1 year after you list on the TSX, you can file papers to list in the US with no additional work. So it's a great path. And I think it's been good to get this first year under our belt and potentially at some point do a US listing as step 2.
Cool. What do you think is the best part of being a public CEO, and what's the worst? I feel like there's more worst of, chasing expectations of what other people think you should be doing. Like, what are the things that are hard? What are great?
I think the best part of it is that you kind of you determine your own future. I mean, I think when you have a board of a lot of investors, they have a big influence on what you're doing. Whereas when you're a public company, it's really up to you and the management team. And if you fail, it's your own fault. And you're answerable to your board, you're answerable to your shareholders. But they're quite diverse. You wouldn't know them unless. Well, that's not true. We spend a lot of time after earnings report talking to our big holders because we do know who they are, but they're fairly dispersed, right? So it's really, it's up to you whether you succeed or fail. And I think it actually professionalizes the company on another level. It's like graduation to another level. You also get another caliber of people, in terms of who wants to be a part of your team. So, attracting talent, being able to be a bigger global player, and also, being able to acquire companies with credibility. So those are all the positives. The negatives are, something like COVID happens and you're in the retail and restaurant business, servicing them, and people think that your business is vanished overnight. And your stock goes from, $30, $40 to 10. So
yeah, well, global pandemics, those never happen. It's nothing to worry about.
Like, but we couldn't wait to do our earnings report to prove to people that, our customers are established businesses that are going to deliver your e-com using our solution and are not going to give up. So, it's, you get to explain your story more on a public stage. There's periods where you can't talk about something, but, there there are those moments where, you get to show all that you've accomplished. And so I do actually like the quarterly pace, and I think it pushes the company to kind of reach its full potential.
Great. Well, maybe pulling on the string of the COVID-19, you guys have 1,200 staff. Like, I'm assuming you're in some sort of work from home across all these different offices. How's that going?
Yeah, it's entirely work from home. We have spent tons of money on beautiful spaces. We're in a 130-year-old chateau, kind of looks like a castle, office in Montreal, and 13 other offices around the world. And these are spaces that we thought that, a lot of the magic was to do with the space. Our go-to-market teams, it's like at the end of month or end of quarter, end of fiscal year, it's like Wall Street in there. The energy is like very, very palpable. You bring people through there, and it's electric. And so we're like, is this really going to work if we're all working from home? And not to say that people don't have a tough time. Everybody that's working from home has up and down days, but it's amazing how productive people have been. I think that the management team's never been more productive because we're not all flying around trying to visit all the different offices. We're all, basically at our desks and available all the time. So I think we're getting a lot done. So it's been good. I think I think the younger the employee, the more they're dying to go back to the office. For the 20-year-old, person in go-to-market or support, 25-year-old, they're the castle is their social scene. It's their, it's a source of pride. And for some types of employees like engineers, like they don't want to go back, or they want to go back when they, whenever they want to. So it will change. We're still figuring it out. I think by the fall, people that want to go back will be able to go back. And maybe some of the other offices sooner, like Australia, for example. The Sydney office is already, they're all, there was a lot less impact over there. So they're already kind of back in some ways.
Right. And so you guys haven't changed policies. There's not, like I saw Twitter basically said they're going to go work from home indefinitely. And you expect it to be like this for a little bit, but eventually everybody will come back to the office, or if some employees want to stay at home, they can.
I think that we don't have the long-term philosophy on this decided, but I don't think we are the company that's going fully digital and no office. I think our spaces are important to the Lightspeed culture. But I think we're going to be, we had very few people, we had select people sort of, working from home before all this happened. And that's, I think, we've learned a lot about what we can accomplish with much more flexibility around work from home.
Cool. So when you think about your customers, like I agree, you're mentioning before, as a public company, your customers are restaurants and retail, and restaurants and retail get basically completely shut down almost worldwide. How did that affect them? Obviously being closed, and like, what did you guys do to help them?
Yeah. So, I mean, our hospitality customers are primarily centered in Europe. And so we saw the drops in cause it's all in the cloud. So we saw the drops in transaction volume as those companies locked down. It was like, whoa, so, but now they're the first to reopen. So I think the diversity of Lightspeed, the geographic diversity, has really helped us. Plus the diversity of our product suite. So we've been preaching omni-channel for 5 years, which is, you got to have your physical business tools, but you got to have your digital tools, like your e-com, your delivery, all of these things. So we offered all of these tools for, really affordable or free for the first couple of months. And we just offered these things to customers to make sure they were transacting. And so, when we did our earnings report, a couple of weeks ago, 3/4 of our customers were doing business in some form. So that's an amazing show of resilience.
Yeah.
From our customer base. So it's like, these are businesses that are, they're average making about $600K USD per year. So they're at scale, local independent businesses. These are not hobbyists or casual sellers. And they're going to use every tool in the toolbox available from Lightspeed to continue to do business with their customers. So that's what we learned. We offered those programs. We offered, resources in terms of COVID-19. But we also did one thing that I'm really proud of, because we celebrated our 15-year anniversary just as everything was locking down in March. And we launched this program called Lightspeed Local. And we gave $500 to every Lightspeed employee and said, go spend it at a Lightspeed customer, order something from them, order pickup or delivery from a restaurant, and post it on Instagram or Twitter. And we just had, like, for me, like, our 15-year anniversary was sort of like a Friday, Saturday that was like it was just not what we had planned. We'd planned this huge celebration in the castle with, custom t-shirts from our favorite, clothing shop we'd done a collaboration with called Off the Hook. And the only thing that saved it for me was seeing all these Instagram stories of our employees buying at all of our customers. And we just gave those customers just a sense of hope, and that, we really cared about them. And so we just, what was the point of spending money on performance marketing and Google ads in the middle of a pandemic? We just put all that money towards, like, spending money with our customers. And I think that's been, I think showed, showed that we were a good partner.
Yeah, I would agree. I think these webinars, we charge people $10 to attend the webinar, and all of that money we're using to buy gift certificates from Vancouver College alumni owned restaurants. And I've talked to, and it's not lots of money, it's $300 or $400, but I've talked to a few of them and they're, like, super thankful for the money, because it really means a lot to them right now. So I think you're right. $500 is a lot to some small restaurant.
Yeah. And what's amazing too is that there was a Slack channel of, like, for Lightspeed Local internally, a lot of our employees discovered that they could buy a lot of stuff that they were buying off Amazon and buying a lot of, and other, they could buy them from our own customers and support community. And we learned a lot about our customers. We learned a lot about what we believe in as a company. And, we all have our favorite customers and favorite restaurants, favorite retail stores that use our software, but we learned a lot more about more of our customers. And so that's, I think, a good thing.
Nice. Well, maybe switch topics a bit, just in keeping on our time schedule here. The book, The Age of Union, we were lucky to have you back in Vancouver in May last year when you were running around Canada and the US, and we kind of timed up that event at the Vancouver Lawn and Tennis Club back when we could do these things. Mm-hmm. But for those that missed it, can you maybe tell a bit more about the book and, how you got to decide to, I'm just going to bang on a book on the side?
Yeah, so has a lot to do with 15 years Lightspeed, and also 5 years of Never Apart, which is a cultural center that I opened in 2015. And I wrote a manifesto for Never Apart. So it's an art gallery, cultural center, but the idea was to actually create change. And over time I realized that the emerging artists that we were kind of bringing into the space so that they could, bring all this social commentary through art, and the entrepreneurs that we're helping at Lightspeed, and also the entrepreneurs that I help at in the startup scene, I felt like a real similarity between the conversations. And what I realized is that there is a common thread, that all these folks are people that are change makers, people that are trying to make an impact, whether it's they're trying to push things forward through a technology project, or through their art, or through the local business because they want to improve add something to their community. And so Age of Union, the subtitle is Igniting the Changemaker. It's just a kit, a guidebook for anybody that wants to start up a project and kind of be a change maker. And I think that for me, the 4 pillars of that have been leadership, culture, spirituality, and the foundation of it all, which is nature. Ultimately, if we're going to be a change maker, we have to think about the bigger project, which is saving our environment. So thinking of those 4 things holistically, I think makes a good guidebook for how you can think about how you make your daily choices, and how you make your own impact. So that was sort of the idea behind it, especially since as I was mentoring people, I felt like I was giving them a lot of business tips and not giving them some of the cultural or spiritual or some of the other elements. And as I was giving talks, I was not able to kind of talk about all of those things. And so those are really expanded. The book has really expanded sort of the areas where I can delve in with people that are starting things.
Awesome. And it's a beautiful book. You've also, there's an art version of it as well, right? There's two versions. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a soft cover book which came out first, then there was the art book. It was always intended to be an art book because there's a lot of there's 9 artists that are featured in it, but we just put out the soft cover first, just easier to to read than an art book. And then recently we put out a free ebook at the beginning of COVID, just because the topics and sort of the long term of like what kind of world do we want to live in, what kind of people do we need to become in order for us to build a better future. It's very applicable to this moment where we can pause and reflect during COVID. So we released it as a free ebook, and soon a free audiobook, just to get it out there and start a conversation. And the ebook's done amazing. So pretty happy with that. And we did a whole bunch of Instagram lives during the launch of that, which we've been working with lots of conservationists and people working in the arts, people working in entrepreneurship, and having these holistic conversations, which has been fun.
Awesome. And so just quickly, where do people find the ebook now? It's ageofunion.com, or what was the?
Yeah, ageofunion.com. It's a free download.
Awesome. And then you talk a lot. I was watching some of your the videos and stuff that you've done, and obviously we had you out for the Vancouver thing. You talk a lot about spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a bit more about how you think about that and why it's important?
So I think that at the same time as I started Lightspeed, I also went on a spiritual journey, and I think that I've always my mother's on this Zoom. My parents are very spiritual people. Grew up in a Catholic with a Catholic background, and I think that deepened further at VC. I think I had a great experience. In my early 20s when I moved to Montreal, I made a conversion to Judaism. Don't see that as a big conflict with Catholicism. I just found a path there. But I went on that journey at the same time as the Lightspeed journey. And that was something that I feel like when I tell people the story of Lightspeed and don't tell them about the other journey that actually helped me through the roller coaster of Lightspeed, that I'm not telling them I'm not giving them the whole picture. And so I think it's just as important to invest in yourself spiritually so that you have a foundation, and that you can be a strong foundation for others, and that you can be that source of calm when everything is crashing down around you and people look to you as a leader. And so spirituality, I think, is something that I think that any person should be investing in their soul, just as and as much as we do in our body and in our and in the things that are more in the material world. So I think it's an investment that you make in yourself as an instrument to be a better instrument for any project that you take on. And it's ultra important to talk about. And so in the Age of Union, I try to talk about it in a very universal way, even though many of the ideas are Judeo-Christian. It's a topic that is not easily approached in a modern way. It's not talked about in a modern way. And so a lot of people are disconnected from it or think that spirituality means new age and crystals. So tried to come at it from a fresh perspective. And what's interesting is that when I do talks for a tech audience, afterwards, when I do a book signing, that's all people want to talk about.
Spirituality.
That's all they want to talk about. Yeah. So because nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. And so you tie it kind of together in the book, right? In the back of the book, I believe there's 40 acts that you sort of suggest that sort of people can do in their lives. Can you maybe give us a couple examples of those?
Yeah, so there's there's those 4 pillars, like leadership, culture, spirituality, and nature. But I didn't want to drop a whole bunch of philosophy on people and then don't give them any suggestions of things to do.
No action items.
You got to have some action items. So there's 40 acts of union, and it's it comes from the Jewish idea of the mitzvah, which is like you take a physical act and you imbue it with an intention, and that elevates the act. It makes it a spiritual act, and so. the 40 acts are things that you can do, whether it's for the environment or whether for your family or your community. And it's just being conscious, because we're so on autopilot and we do a lot of things without thinking about what we do or why we do it. And so we just slowed down a little bit and decided, okay, I'm going to think about what I'm doing, and maybe not use a plastic container, or have a plant-based meal even though you're not necessarily a vegetarian yet, or you do something for your community, or you promote something to increase awareness about something, or you give back in some way. So that, there's lots of categories in the acts of unions. We try to cover off everything, and you may read it and realize I do a lot of these things, or there's some things that I'm doing that if I thought about it a little bit more, maybe I'd do it this way, or try this. So it's very invitational, and I think it's like, the one of the main quotes from the book is, every daily act can be an act of elevation. So act by act, small things and big things. It doesn't always have to be big things. In Judaism, the mitzvahs are not ranked by scale or magnitude. All small and big acts are all valuable, and so they become their own reward. You do something with intention, it becomes its own reward.
Yeah, it's great. I think with this whole COVID situation, it kind of ties into this, of the thought of, because everybody's life's been kind of ripped apart, and all of a sudden we're not doing our normal things of like, oh, I always fly to this conference, and now the conference is canceled, and some of them have quickly pivoted online, and maybe that flight never happens again because now we've figured out better ways to deal with our sort of normal day to day.
We are more conscious of the things that we do and the things that we don't do. So, and that's really what the book's about, is like, how do we start to think about what we want to be, as an individual, and then sort of, do we need to, like, and I think of myself and just sort of what became normal, in terms of flying around and doing all the things that just became regular course, and realize I don't need to do a lot of that stuff, and it's not always necessary. It doesn't make me necessarily happier or a better person, and you can direct your energy elsewhere. And so in some respects, this is a good moment to take stock and maybe update your perspective.
It's awesome. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to start reading through some of these questions that have come in on the chat. They're going to be a little bit all over the place because people typed them in when you were talking about something else. So I hope you don't mind. But this one here, he's asking, do you think studying religious studies and art history gave you a different perspective or approach to building a tech company?
Yeah, for sure. I think that understanding, well, as you can see, they fed into other projects like Never Apart and Age of Union. But I think liberal arts is something that gives you a real understanding of where, how we developed as a species, as civilizations. I think that critical thinking, all of the things you get from a liberal arts education, and art history and religious studies personally are things that I've always been drawn to. And so when I went back, I just decided, I want to pursue the things that I want to dig into. And I think that that's different for everybody, but they've for sure influenced my leadership style. And had I taken finance, maybe I would have had investors earlier. So everything that you study, I think it has an impact. For sure, everything's applied.
That's awesome. This one says Lightspeed is compared a lot to Shopify. Do you think this is accurate?
No, I think Shopify isn't.
Well, you're both rocket ship Canadian tech companies, which is great.
I think like the comparison for all those reasons. Definitely, we serve different markets. We serve different customers, in terms of modern businesses running on cloud-based software, there's a huge universe of customers out there. And so there's the Shopifys, the Squares, the Toasts, the Touch Bistros of the world. There's a huge sea of business, and we don't really overlap for competing on the same kinds of customers.
Cool. Tony asks, he says, you've spent years building the people culture. as many, tech companies have. But with a work from home culture, can you do the same thing, or how do you adjust how you deal with sort of the people culture while everybody's all spread out at home?
It's a good question. I mean, we have been so oriented towards, our spaces and in-person meetings and big company gatherings and parties. And it's just been a big part of who we are, celebrations. And it's what I have had to do is, we'd have a quarterly town hall. We're now doing a monthly town hall. And I'm doing it again for the German teams because they're new. New acquisition, and I'm doing it again for me and our president. We're doing it again for the Australia teams because they're in a different time zone. So we do the company town hall 3 times a month, the same
Wow.
one. And I'm doing basically a weekly email that gives everybody an update. And I think everybody is communicating way more, so that people feel in touch with each other. People are leveraging Zoom and Slack and all those kinds of things. But, I think that there is a certain element of Lightspeed culture that is, we serve physical businesses. We of course we're helping them with their digital strategy, but we believe in physical businesses in communities, and so we're oriented that way too as a company. So I think we're going to sort out how to make sure that culture lives in the digital work from home space, but we're also going to want to come back to our space.
Nice. Mark, my fellow co-president of the Alumni Association, he asked, do you think we can host an event of the Montreal chapter of the Alumni Association in the castle?
Well, yeah, actually there's going to be some new spaces opening up at the castle for sure. We've gotten some of the other floors, it's pretty awesome. It's a very historical building in the city. So yeah, definitely open to that.
Maybe when we're back to normal, we can grab all the alumni that have shown up in Montreal.
Cool.
Have you ever considered becoming a B Corp?
Yeah. Actually, we have our chairman Patrick Pichette is quite interested in that certification, and we measured ourselves against the B Corp standards at the beginning of this journey, and we've been working towards being able to be classified as B Corp, whether we actually register or not. I can't really tell you where we've landed, but I'm really happy with the progress that we've made. And we're not a registered B Corp, but we actually are in the range where we are a B Corp. So
Nice.
Didn't hear it from me here, but yeah, no, it's a good certification to aspire to, because it's multifaceted and it makes sure that you're a corporation that's got corporate social responsibility at its heart.
Yeah, the whole triple bottom line. I remember I went and visited the TSE headquarters in New York with my wife. I don't know, a couple of years ago. We were sitting in the main hallway and they were literally weighing the garbage on the way out the door, and I asked him why, and he's like, part of being a B Corp, you have to know exactly how much you're throwing out. So it's definitely an interesting thing for a business. This is a different thread, do you have a mental health plan for your employees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something that we rolled out early on during COVID. We rolled out COVID days, which were kind of mental health days and a special kind of sick day, and at the same time a mental health program with related software for people to connect with mental health with professionals.
Nice.
I think it's really important. I think even before COVID, we were experiencing, as we got bigger and the team got bigger and the pressures got bigger as a public company, hearing this more and more, people facing burnout and I think that that's just a reality, and it's a modern reality of companies of all kinds. And so I think I think Bell's done some really great work about having this conversation, and I think that we're definitely putting a priority on it.
Great. I've got 2 last questions for you. Grandier just popped this one here. He says, with all these people working from home, it creates lots of security vulnerabilities. Do you see a rise in security issues, malicious and fraudulent threats, transactions, that kind of stuff?
I think we've had to, we have invested in security, certainly, also as more business goes online, when you have transactions all happening in physical premises with chip cards, there's very, very little, risk for our customers of fraud. That changes when things go more digital, when things go more into e-commerce. So yeah, no, we see, I think, commensurate with the amount of business revenue that's gone online, we see more attempts at fraud. But we have, this is for the most part a solved problem in the world in terms of like monitoring tools and all of that. And so that's something that we had already invested in.
Nice. So thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, pleasure.
Everybody appreciates it. I got a few comments from the guys in the chat. One of them's like, he sounds like he really loves his company, which I agree. It sounds like you do, which is great. My final question for you is, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, actually any entrepreneur? What's, if you had to sort of dispense one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think that one of the things that we were kind of pushed to do at the very beginning in order to get grants was write a 3-year business plan. And being an art student with no finance background, I was like, oh, we'll just BS through this spreadsheet and just write the written portion of it. But if I look back at that business plan and that original 3-year forecast, we missed the first year, but the second year we almost hit the number right on. And the third year we exceeded, and it actually planned out all the staffing, it made us choose what we were going to do and not going to do. The written part, actually the mission of what we did back then, it's the same mission as what we have now. So it really crystallizes, when you're starting a business, there's just all sorts of possibilities and a lot of things you can do. And writing that business plan really focuses you and makes you understand what you're going to do and how you're going to measure it. And if you're totally off track, that plan, then you're doing something wrong, or maybe you have to pivot, and at least you've got something to go against. And so I didn't think it was going to be of any value, and it's super, super valuable. And if anybody ever wants to see the Lightspeed original business plan, I send it to people.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. The company was called Dasilva Systems, and it sold a software called Lightspeed. And it was, anybody who wants to see that, I recommend doing those kinds of plans. They're kind of old school, but very important.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dax. Thanks for doing this. It's been really great. Thanks to all our guests for joining us. We do this every couple of weeks. The next one coming up is Kieran McConnell, who's going to join us, who is a VPD officer here in Vancouver, and he's going to talk about the current situation with the police and how he's thinking about it. So thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Dax. Have a great night.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone. See you.